Welcome to this retro episode of the Vital Point podcast. My name is Jonathan Schecter. I'm a transformation coach, breathwork facilitator, and host of the Vital Point podcast. First of all, thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you like the podcast, if you could subscribe to the channel, there's a lot of content here, and we're constantly putting out new episodes of the podcast, in addition to trying to get these retro episodes posted as well. So I wanted to give just a little bit of context about the episode you're about to watch, just so that there's no confusion. If you've watched any of the season 1 episodes, you'll get a much longer intro about how I came up with the podcast and why it's called One Question Wednesday on these original episodes. So check that out if you are interested. Now, season 2 was still originally called One Question Wednesday when it aired on Instagram. And season 2 begins with buying this microphone. The first season didn't have any mics. And it ended when I decided to change the name of the podcast and rebrand it from One Question Wednesday to The Vital Point. And the reason for that is pretty simple. I just started to get better at podcasting, and the conversations that I was having with the guests were starting to get longer and longer and really not follow the one question format in which we started. The other thing was, I was like, why did I decide to call it One Question Wednesday? What if I don't want to publish on Wednesday? Why did I paint myself into that corner? So yeah, there's some amazing guests in this season. We still were recording on Instagram using Instagram Live to build an audience, to build engagement. However, season 2, I also started to notice that maybe Instagram wasn't the best format for a longer podcast. And there were some technical issues on a few of the episodes, including one episode that I wasn't able to salvage for YouTube just because there were just some quality issues with what happened on the Instagram video. But nonetheless, there's some amazing guests here, some really cool topics, and really starting to get into like what the podcast was about. You know, it started to become more clear to me as I started to get better at hosting. And it's still a little rough, to be honest, in these earlier episodes, but also like what I wanted to do with the podcast. So there's, some somatic experiencing, there's some breath work, there's integration. And the episode ends with a great interview with Matt Gottesman, and then starts the tradition that I've kept up till this point of ending the season with a Q&A. And that was where it started to get more of me doing solo casts instead of just having a guest, which is how we started. So I hope you enjoy this episode that you're about to watch. I hope you are enjoying the new episodes that continue to be posted weekly here on YouTube and on all audio platforms. If you have been checking those out and then you're coming back to this retro episode, you might notice it being a little bit rough around the edges. But hey, that's how we grow. That's how we learn. And we all have to start somewhere, And if you're interested in learning more about breathwork, about psychedelic integration, about how to put some of these practices into your life to transform, definitely click the link below and get my free guide to using breathwork for integration. You'll also be subscribed to my newsletter, and there's all kinds of amazing stuff on there, including news about breathwork circles online that I hold, and if you're in Tucson, events that I hold in person. So again, thank you so much for supporting the show. Thank you for supporting the channel. If you know anybody that it would enjoy these podcasts, please share it with them. And like always, the vital point is to practice. We don't get stronger by reading about push-ups. So one of my goals with the podcast is to share all these different types of practices with you so that you feel inspired to go and practice them. So hope that you enjoy this episode.
And our guest is Martin McPhilimey.
He is a health coach, sleep expert, breath coach. What else do you do, Martin? I know you're a man of many talents.
My background was always sleep and respiratory science. So I came through a clinical science role in the medical field. And I essentially discovered that there was gaps because there's such a rigorous kind of, I guess, box put around medical practitioners to say, hey, look, they can only treat people in certain ways. But when it comes to sleep and when it comes to stress, when it comes to sleep and breathing, I consistently saw that stress was the major issue for both of them, but that was never really diagnosed by a specialist. So I worked with cardiac specialists and respiratory specialists, and they were like, okay, well, your lungs are fine, your heart's fine. Why is this whole system not working properly? So I wanted to take a step away from that and go to more specialized kind of consulting and coaching and help people improve their stress, raise their intolerance to stress through breathing, which also then improves their sleep quality and their whole health in general.
Awesome. That's a tall order, and I'm glad that you're out there filling in those gaps. So the question for today's show actually came from a recent post that you did that I really resonated with me, and I just wanted to ask you a little bit more about it. So in the post you said, building awareness through feeling the signals your body produces under stress and being able to regulate yourself is one of the most powerful things you can do for health, mindset, and performance right now. So can you just elaborate on that a little bit, and maybe we can kind of chat about it?
Yeah, of course. I guess there's many issues that are going on at the moment. Number one, we're reliant on external technologies a lot more than we were beforehand. So we've got watches on our wrists that tell us when our heart rate's going up or going down. It might buzz for some reason. We're checking apps on our phone to look at our health. Or we're even outsourcing to doctors to say, hey, I think I've got a problem. I don't have any idea what it is. Can you tell me what it is? Whereas, thousands of years ago, humans wouldn't have had that, but they would have been able to discover that they have an issue wrong or something that was going on within their body. And what I was really pointing at was connected to emotion and what emotion is. Now, if we strip down to what an emotion is basically we only know what's going to happen in the future based on our previous experience from our own personal past and a collective past. Now, with what happens, if we have a pre-assumption in our mind that's unconscious, and then something happens in the external that doesn't match that, it creates something that's unexpected, which causes an emotion, whether that's anger, whether that's fear, whether that's what's going on. And that's continuously happening all day long.
Right.
But because we're so cognitive nowadays, we're up in our mind, we're always processing thoughts, we're stressed, we're not really feeling what's going on in our body. And there's two reasons for that. Number one, because we are, like I just said, we're so external. But number two, because we're so stressed, we're not connected to our what's called our interoceptive system in our body, which is like an eighth sense, really, to say inside our body, our heart rate is either beating fast, our breathing rate is fast, we're breathing deep, our internal organs, what state are they in? And it's like our feeling function. It's our feeling function of awareness inside our own body. And that's, as you may know, it's all connected through the signals that are sent from the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is 80% of the vagus nerve is just detecting what's going in the body, sending it back to the brain and saying, this is the state of our body. Is it stressful? Is it, are we safe? The polyvagal theory by Stephen Porges, are we in a safe place? Yep. That sort of stuff. And because we're not connected to our body, we're more in our mind. I think there's a lack of awareness of how people experience their own emotions, how they feel them, how they recognize them. Now, does anger make your heart rate go up? Do you get this kind of tension in your body? When you're nervous, do you get something in your stomach to say you're nervous? Are we really paying attention to that anymore? So
right.
I don't believe people are. I think it's kind of and there's many people, there's many of us are exactly the same. And that was what that was about. What I believe is the key to our performance and our health is not being so reliant on external needs, but being able to recognize first in our own self-awareness, our own bodily awareness, and our own health awareness, through feeling function of what's going on internally, and being able to then, I guess, process that to what's going on out externally, whether that's through a means of being able to tell people, this is how I feel, and then labeling the emotion. Once you've labeled an emotion and you know how it feels, it's almost like you can pick that up a lot faster.
Right.
And with practice, and that might mean putting yourself into a state of fear, and that's where the things like ice baths come in, or I prefer to use high intensity exercise followed by breath control, because then you set enough kind of a fear of panic in your body. So I work with individuals typically who might be high performance or high function individuals, but have anxiety. And one of the things I get them to do, usually in week 2 or week 3 of working with them, is, okay, let's get you in the gym. Let's get your heart rate up. Let's get you doing some burpees. Then I want you to try and sit down. I want you to try and control your breath. And I want you to try and add some breath holds in there. But I want you to sit and hold the urge of that breath hold and just notice how it makes you feel in your body. And then what stories are created in your mind and what goes up into your head. And are you able to have some control over that? And what happens eventually is people get used to the feeling of that panic, that fear, the anxiety. They recognize the signals, but they realize through their breath they can actually control it, and they can stay calm in their mind. And all of a sudden you've given individuals a tool that they can use for the rest of their life whenever they feel that same urge, which is an innate urge of fear, which happens to everyone every day, for the rest of their life. But they realize they have a tool inside them. That doesn't mean they need to go to anywhere or anyone, that they can actually use there and then. So that's really what that post was about.
There's so much there. I feel like there's like 3 different directions that I could take this, because it just, all of it resonates so strongly to me. My initial reaction reading your post was something very similar to what you're talking about, of like, this is to me the magic of doing things like ice baths. I know that there's a list of health benefits from doing that. I've never focused on those in my own practice or working with clients. It's always been, look at the story that's happening in your mind. The moment, like, even, sometimes I'm so clued into it, it'll be like when I get up in the morning, even if I have to take an ice bath in the afternoon. Like, if today's an ice bath day, by the app, even when I'm getting up in the morning, already there's a little story in my mind of like, do I really need to do this today? And that's after a few years of doing this practice regularly. It's like, but as soon as I've made that decision that I'm not going to back out, that this is what I'm doing, it gets so much easier. And so when people are getting used to this practice, I always tell them, just watch the story. And especially like as you're walking up to the bath, watch that story, because it's that moment when you get in and you catch your breath and you realize, oh wait, I'm not going to die. Like I'm not in danger. You brought up the polyvagal theory. So I'm not in danger. I'm actually safe, at least relative to what I thought where my safety was at before. And then that's when all of a sudden the changes start to happen. You can relax into it. And so I really like that you touched on, using a similar practice with exercise and breath holds, because you're giving people this experience of, oh, the story that's in my mind isn't necessarily like true. Like, and I've found that having that little bit of space is something that you can cultivate and widen, right? And then there's just so many benefits to putting ourselves in these, slightly stressful environments, because we're healing. I love that you work with exercise, because isn't that what what we're doing with our bodies physically, right? We're stressing them out. We're tearing them. We're tearing our muscles a little bit. We're putting ourselves under a little bit of stress so that we can heal and get stronger, right? And so I've always looked at ice baths as sort of like that same activity, but for our for our psyche, for our mind, for our nervous system.
There's two things, I guess, that pop up for me there. What you're saying, especially with the ice baths or cold exposure in general, is I like how you focused on once you're in there, you can kind of relax. But there's also the anticipation that has something to teach you. Now, when if you're trying to become someone who's a high performance individual, having the fast decision making skills is a characteristic of someone who's high performance. Now, if you're sort of an individual who's always like, oh, I'm not sure if I'm making the right decision, it's a bit scary. Like, do I go left or do I go right? Which way is that going to take you, sort of thing. But if you're having to, say, have a cold shower and you've got to stand underneath it and you've got to flick on the cold shower straight away, when you start, there's an anticipation. You're concerned, right. It's like you pause for a moment. But what I think that does is it just teaches you to just go, okay, just turn on the cold shower and don't even worry about it. And that's where I started with cold exposure. It was more about getting comfortable with the uncomfortable and making yourself being able to just do things without hesitation, like just having the confidence just to go and do something that could be quite scary or uncomfortable. So that's one angle that I love from that. But also what we're doing is as well, we're teaching people, we're planting a seed of a growth mindset. If you're able to change the frame of an individual's thought that was something that was really scary before them, when the next scary thing or next fear comes towards them again, they've almost got that courage inside them to say, hey, actually, I can reflect on that time before where I've done that, or it's built the resilience like we talked about to say, actually, the fear isn't as much as I believed it was, or the story in my head isn't as true as it was. So I'm going to be able to take that action anyway.
Yeah, there's something about, other people have said it much more eloquently than I'm going to right now, but do things that suck, like practice doing things that suck so that when you inevitably have to do things that suck, you don't have a choice. You're more trained to it. You're more used to it. And I had the exact same, a very similar experience. I started doing cold exposure after I got divorced, and while I was going through the divorce, because it was like, well, I'm going to have to do a bunch of stuff that I'm not going to be happy with and I don't want to do. But do I have a choice? Not really at this point. So maybe if I get in cold water every day, and just like you're saying, that dealing with that anticipation and being able to just hold it, to not be a slave to it, and just to feel it, to let it flow through me. There's got to be a benefit to that, and I truly feel that having that practice made going through that divorce process a lot easier. You and I were talking a little bit the other night about the latest Huberman podcast. And he was talking about a study where they had a mouse, on a wheel, right? Because mice love to use the wheels, and it's really good for them, right? It's giving them exercise, it's letting off endorphins. And then they had another mouse that was trapped inside of the wheel, but his wheel was connected to the first mouse's wheel, so that every time the first mouse used the wheel, the second mouse was forced to also exercise as well. Well, the health benefits to the first mouse were way more, right? Because the second mouse was getting signals of anxiety, stress, powerlessness, I would imagine, right, for a mouse. And whereas the first mouse, who was voluntarily exercising, was getting, all these benefits and all these healthy things. So it just goes to show you like the power of our intention, and of like actually willingly going into these situations. Like that's where we're actually getting these benefits to our, to our neural systems, to our nervous systems. Whereas if we're dragging our feet and we're listening to that voice, it's like, oh, don't do this. We're not getting the same benefits from the practice at all. Yeah. Both on a physiological or psychological level.
And I take this into breathwork practice, and breathwork prescription. If someone sits there and they after a few weeks, like, Martin, look, I've tried to do it every night for 10 minutes or 5 minutes, and it just makes me feel more uncomfortable. And okay, well, you're a stressed person. I'm not going to force you to do this. Let's try and figure out what's going to be beneficial for you. Now, is it just going to be taking it down to 3 minutes of work, or is it starting a little bit less so you can kind of hit a goal, get that goal, hit the dopamine, have some kind of reward, some praise. Then the next time you kind of go, okay, well, 5 minutes, what's that then? Because I know I read the study myself and looked at it, and there is definitely a choice element of choosing to intend to go into it. And the first thing I think when it comes to neuroplasticity and change is intention. Is
Right.
like you have to have the intention, but not the intention that is external. Now, you can't go to a coach and then just go, oh, coach just told me to do it, so I'm just going to do it. You've actually got to want, you've got to want to create that change. And for you, going through a divorce where you're going, well, actually, it's probably a big enough factor in your life to say, actually, I want to create some change inside me to be able to be strong enough to go through this and to get through the other side. Like, that's a powerful anchor point to say, hey, look, I can do this.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're absolutely right. Our brains are so plastic and so able to adapt and change. And just to sort of bring it full circle to what you were saying in the beginning, isn't it interesting the flip side to that, where if we're not using those awareness skills and those neurons and strengthening them, we're starting to actually like sort of outsource those, with technology, with our watches and our sensors, instead of cluing in. And then it's, that's another way that our brains are actually plastic, right? In a different way, where we can, I had to write a paper in college about, how we're becoming cyborgs just with our cell phones, right? Because there's things, 100 years ago, we had to remember numbers that we don't have to remember anymore. And I can't even imagine what it's like to be in school right now when you can just open your phone and get every single answer that the teacher would possibly ask you, in your pocket. So yeah, definitely strengthening those those neurons and that awareness is a skill. And I'm really excited that you gave me a new way to practice that, that I'm going to look into, using the exercise and the breath holds, because the ice baths have been really beneficial for me so far.
Yeah. So I guess maybe to give you a bit of value in anyone who's going to listen, a starting point would be really to, when you finished some kind of high intensity exercise, try to sit down or lie down on your back, just nasal breathing, maybe take 5 breaths to allow yourself to recover, but then go into some kind of control, or whether that's just prolonging your exhale, but a shorter inhale. But at the top, have a hold when you're on full until you get if you're a beginner, maybe a light urge to breathe out. And then at the end, maybe just a couple of seconds, because an exhalation hold is very challenging, and build from there. So I might particularly start as an individual going 3 seconds in, 5-second hold, 6 seconds out with a 2-second hold. Do that for a couple of weeks, and then can you push that to 10 seconds at the top and 3 seconds at the bottom? And can we expand that out as we go along to the point where your number one, your CO2 tolerance is improving because you've got CO2 going through your body at the time. But number two, you're getting the psychophysiological relationship to your own top-down control from your prefrontal cortex, the rest of your body through your breath. So yeah, just see whether you can expand that out over a period of weeks.
Awesome. That's a great tip, and I really appreciate you providing that value for people.
No worries.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Martin. If people want to work with you or learn more about your work and your offerings, where should they go?
Yep. If you actually click in my bio link on here on Instagram, you'll find my website. Performance Through Health is the company that I've named and on there really, and you pretty much find me on social medias through Performance Through Health.
Yeah, you're doing a program about like sleep health and improvement right now, right?
So currently my focus has been on sleep. I tend to go through breathing, then I'll go through stress, then I go through sleep, and I go through cycles just to delivering value to try and
awesome.
Help the audience through that.
Very cool. Well, definitely appreciate your time and your knowledge, and also for getting up early to chat with me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jonathan, and appreciate the invite for bringing me on here as well and having a chat.
Yeah, absolutely. So I usually we'll pull the video down and then repost it so that you can post it on yours or download it as well. And thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll be back next week with another One Question Wednesday. Until then, thanks everyone. Have a good evening or good day wherever you're at. Thanks.